What is up, Maniacs? I am Zach, and I am the Milly Maker Maniac. Welcome to our Week 8 Game-by-Game Breakdown, where I take you through my spreadsheet in which I take the team's PFF grades against each other and look for matchup advantages, start to give us a indication of where we're going to be headed this week with our player pool. We'll also dig into looking at pricing early on in the week and get an idea of who those guys are that we're going to target and target heavily. This evolves as the week goes on, but it's a good place to start. So let's go ahead and jump right in, and we'll look at the first game on our main slate with the Atlanta Falcons versus the Miami Dolphins. Overall, Falcons have one of the biggest offensive advantages of the week. Really solid both in the passing game. The pass is actually their passing grade is kind of one of the lower ones across the NFL. If we go over here, Penix hasn't played great yet, but everything else around them is very solid. So big advantage in the run game, pass rush versus pass blocking. This is a big advantage here. So that is a big win for them. The giving Penix more time should allow them to have more success this week. And then the receiving grade is really solid here. So let's jump over and look at pricing, then we can quickly hit on Miami, but it's all bad. Offensive line is terrible. Tua has played very poorly. I don't know if he'll get the start this week or not, but whoever's playing, it's going to be a tough situation for the Dolphins. They just aren't a very good team. I think Mike McDaniels is doing the absolute best he can with that team, but there just isn't much to work with there. So let's jump over and look at this pricing on this game. I don't think I'll be playing any Tua lineups. We'll see if Ewers starts. Played a little bit. So, yeah, doesn't sound like we know anything yet. Maybe it is Tua again. 4,800, maybe I'll build a couple lineups because you can just build with Achane and Waddle. But, yeah, I'm out on Achane at 7,300. Probably. Actually, it's a pretty attractive price now I think about it because you got your top three guys. Taylor's super expensive this week at 9,500. We'll still probably try to get there a little bit just because it is such a juicy matchup against Tennessee. McCaffrey probably won't get to this week at 9K against Houston. I just don't think it's likely that they have a blow-up game against that Houston defense. But Bijan at 8,800 will have to have some interest there. So he's an expensive running back. Barkley, I'll have interest in at 7,600 as well. And then we get to HN at 7,300. Obviously, we expect him to get a lot of volume. Let's see what he had his worst matchup of the year last week, 12.8. Beyond that, he's had a pretty solid floor. So maybe we do go there. At 7,300, it's easier to stomach than he was last week at 8,100. And the week before that at 7,800, where we basically didn't have any of them. All right, maybe we'll build in some Achane. I don't know that he'll be a core play, but at 7,300, we probably have to build him into the player pool a little bit. And their run advantage their disadvantage wasn't too bad. They actually have an advantage in the run versus run D. Let's go back and here I can actually pull up last week's just to show you how comically bad their matchup was last week and why we're avoiding them. Let's go over here to Miami. Yeah, last week's matchup in the run game looked really bad. Minus 19, run versus run D, and then run block versus run D was minus 40. So horrifically bad. This week looks quite a bit better for him. Still minus 13, but that's roughly 30 points better than it was last week and an actual advantage in the run versus run D. So much, much better situation for HN this week, although they haven't really been running the ball well at all, and that isn't necessarily what HN's game is. He gets a lot of his work through the passing game, as we can see over here. Basically 4+ targets every week except for week 4. But I think I expect Atlanta to have success in this game. So if this were to turn into a shootout, it would have to be HN having a big game. And then we pretty much know at receiver, it would have to be Waddle. So yeah, maybe Miami with a cheap stack. Like, I don't know if Waller's going to play this week. Let's see. Week to week. We'll see if he's going to be able to play, but for the most part, it would just be Achane and Waddle And we might mix that across the player pool a little bit the more I think about it. I think they're going to have to be coming back in this game, and it's such a better matchup than it was last week for them. So I think the market will probably be off of these guys, but it might make sense to come back to them. I think they'll have more success than what they had last week for sure. Cleveland's D is just very good. Let's move on to the side that we really like here, Atlanta. So Penix is super attractive to this 4,900. He got banged up a little bit, but I believe he'll play. He hasn't had many big weeks yet. We had him in week 4 a little bit, and that worked out pretty well for us. That was against Washington. I feel like this is their best matchup of the year. And it's also, if you play Penix, you can stack him with Bijan. Like, it's going to be hard to get to Bijan at 8,800. We'll have to get creative with ways to do that. But with Penix being at 4,900, that's just way too cheap. So we can punt at QB, and then that's a way that we can get Robinson into our lineups. Algier is actually kind of intriguing to me, just because I think there's a decent chance that they get out to a big lead and they just run the ball with him in the second half. But maybe one or two just like Hail Mary type throws on that. For the most part, I'm going to be interested in the core guys, and Penix, Bijan, and Drake London. Still way too cheap for his price here. It's had some kind of been boomer bust so far, but target-wise, like, he's their dude. So we're going to attack that like crazy. He'll be one of my core plays for sure. Saw Mooney made a few plays last week. 5 targets, 9.8 fantasy points for 68 yards. This might be a spot where he kind of comes out of nowhere for a big game at 4,400. He'd probably be one of my favorite punt plays of the week, and I'll definitely build some Penix to Mooney lineups. Penix will be one of my core quarterbacks this week at that price. If he gets 25, which I think there's a pretty good shot of against Miami, I also think that the Falcons will want to use this as an opportunity to help him build some confidence. He's been struggling a little bit recently. So I think that they should use this as an opportunity to get him rolling, to build confidence for the rest of the season. So Mooney and London are the receivers that we'd be interested in, and then Pitts we can mix in as well. 10 targets last week. That's definitely intriguing. Didn't do a ton with them, but we would take 7 for 62 at a 3,900 price point. That doesn't kill us at all. And if he gets in the end zone there, then we're looking at a tournament winning score. So Pitts is definitely in play. I like those 5 guys out of Atlanta a lot. That'll probably be one of my biggest core plays of the week, is attacking this Atlanta offense against the Miami defense with 5 really affordable options besides Bijan that look like they should have good weeks. So like that a lot. Let's move on to our next game. We've got the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears are on a 4-game win streak, and it looks like Ben Johnson knows what the hell he's doing. He just seems like a very good coach to me. He understands game management. I also think he is great for Caleb Williams. He's doing a wonderful job of not needing Caleb to win games, putting them in spots to where he's just making easy throws. And occasionally, a couple times a game, he gets to be a little bit more creative and stuff. But for the most part, he's like teaching him how to just do the easy stuff at quarterback, and then they can build up throughout the year and in the rest of his career into some of the bigger plays and the more complicated stuff, the stuff where we can start to see his talent show out. But Ben Johnson is teaching him how to be a winning football player, especially in Chicago, where they're never just going to have a prolific offense just because they're going to be in a lot of cold weather games. It's hard to just have a pass-happy team be successful in that environment. So I think that they're building the team the correct way. They've got a really big advantage in the run game this week. This Baltimore defense has been horrible. They're coming off the bye, so they're going to be getting a couple guys back, I think. We'll have to watch that more throughout the week. Humphrey's been really bad for him this year. I think he'll probably start. I think he's been battling with a little bit of, again, look more into that throughout the week. But I think they're going to lean on the run game more than anything. Go back to Swift and Monungai. It's a little bit hard for him. Monungai got a good chunk of carries last week, but I think Swift is still a guy. Missed on Swift last week, but I do think that this could be a good spot to go back to. I really like Baltimore here. Obviously, we see all of the negative red up here, but this is a cumulative. PFF does this as a cumulative score. So these grades are like for the year. So they move a little bit each week, but each week isn't going to change the overall grade. So these grades are getting drugged down by previous week's performance. Those weeks include obviously 3 weeks without Lamar Jackson, and then they've had tons of injuries on the offensive line. Stanley's going to be back this week at left tackle, and then you get Lamar back this week as well. So to me, this looks really bad, but it's not nearly as bad moving forward. So I would actually give these guys a matchup advantage this week. Chicago's defense has played much better, and they are definitely no slouch. Again, I think this goes back to Ben Johnson being a good coach. They're playing good complementary football. They're doing a good job of understanding what their strengths are and putting guys in the best situations to have success. And they're just playing good all-around football. So because of that, I do think this is one of the more likely games to shoot out this week. It's one of the few where we have overall offensive scores that are positive for both teams. So there is a chance that this could be the game of the week. It's in Baltimore. Every game for Baltimore now is going to have to be treated like a playoff game. That's just the reality of the situation they're in at 1-5. They're still the favorites to win the AFC North, even with the 1-5 record. They have a much easier schedule down the stretch, but that doesn't really matter for this week. They need to win this game to, propel their season. So I think there's a really good chance that we see them come out and have a good game. Let's jump over and look at pricing. Lamar at 6,800. You don't see that very often. So that will probably be a very popular play. I will be very interested in that at 6,800. He didn't practice yesterday, which I found odd, but I think they're just giving him one more day. I would be very surprised if he's not a full participant on Wednesday, but we'll keep an eye on that and make sure if he's not practicing Wednesday, then there's a lot more concern there. But if he practices in any capacity on Wednesday, we'll feel pretty confident about him coming back. And I think he'll be back full speed, but we'll see as we get more reports throughout the week. And we got Derrick Henry at 6,000. Just way too cheap. He will definitely be a core play as well. Chicago's run D hasn't been horrible like we can see over here. We scroll back over to Chicago. Their run D has actually been pretty solid, but it's Derrick Henry, and you're getting Lamar Jackson back. So it's going to change a lot of variables that these grades are based on, because these grades are just looking at execution on individual plays for every single play in previous weeks. This has no predictive measure to it. They're not talking about what they think is likely to occur in the future. They're just grading what has occurred to this point in the season. It does show a big matchup disadvantage right now, but I don't necessarily believe that that's the case. I think there's a lot of variables that have changed that will change that data as we move throughout the year. So a lot of really nice, affordable options here at wide receiver. Obviously, one of the hard things about stacking with Lamar is you don't know who it's going to go to. The linebackers for Chicago have actually been playing pretty well. Normally, the Ravens are pretty heavily dependent on their tight ends and Andrews and Likely. That's where a lot of their fantasy points run through. But I think really the secondary is a little bit more of a weakness for Chicago than the linebackers have been. So I'm going to definitely be interested in these receivers. I'm going to be interested in Baltimore's offense in general this week. But Henry will definitely be a core play. I'll mix in all three of these receivers. Even Tyler Wallace got a little bit of work. Actually, we can't go there, but maybe it was Walker that I was thinking of. Yeah, Walker had the big game in week 2. But these top 3 receivers here, we can mix in all these guys. Hopkins and Bateman both could be really solid punt plays. Bateman in particular, he can have those boom weeks. D-Hop's actually had a couple this year. I mean, I guess not big enough, but I think Bateman's the more likely to give you that like random 5 for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think he's just more likely to get the big plays. Jump over here and look at Chicago. Caleb Williams at 5,600. That's definitely intriguing. Again, probably be more interested in Swift at 5,900. Obviously, you got 13 carries last week. A little bit different game environment. They were mixing and matching, but a good chunk of these came late in the game against New Orleans. And Swift had been banged up coming into the week 2, so I bet that played into it as the game was kind of a little bit more lopsided than the score looks like in the fourth quarter there. So I think Swift is the guy to go with here, and very affordable again at $5,900. Only went up $200 from last week. Wide receiver is way too cheap for this spot. DJ Moore and Luther Burden are both somewhat intriguing as well. Moore's been steady at those 5 targets. I could see this being a week that he pops, though. At 5,300, that's very intriguing. Burden's been on the field a little bit more. Didn't turn into much last week, but we'll keep an eye on Burden. And he can be a punt play this week as well. See if Komet is going to play this week. We don't know. We'll need to keep an eye on that. If he doesn't play, then I would like Loveland. He got 4 targets last week. Creeping up. Feels like this would be a really good matchup for Loveland at 3,000. That could be a really nice play. So we'll keep an eye on Komet. If he's out, we will be into Loveland. Even if Komet's in, I would be into Loveland as well. So I like this game. This is going to be a game that we'll have pieces across a lot of our lineups. I'll do some game stacks of it. When we think about what each team has on the line, like Chicago is building a winning program. They're coming off 4 straight wins. It's been a pretty favorable schedule along that time frame, but still they've done what they've needed to do to win. And then Baltimore is in a desperate situation, and their defense has been bad, so you expect Chicago to score points. Like, it'd be very surprising to me if Chicago scores less than 24 points. I would expect them to score at least that. For Baltimore to win this game, I think it's going to have to be more of a shootout. So I want to play scenarios in which this is a 42-35 type game. I think the way that Chicago is going to try to play this game is to try to have long sustained drives through the run game with some chunk plays here and there, just kind of standard Ben Johnson type approach to it. So that should slow the game down a little bit, but I think Baltimore is just going to be aggressive. I think they're going to try to get Derrick Henry going early in the game and also be looking for those chunk plays with Lamar as well. So this game has a lot more potential than what the grades are kind of showing with the two offenses. Like I said, I think Baltimore's grades are not reflective of their actual talent level. I think a lot more of that has to do with injuries and what happens to your offense when it's led by Cooper Rush and not Lamar Jackson. The other thing, too, is this is at home for Baltimore. This is one of the higher game totals of the week at 50.5 points. Chicago, they're showing their their team implied total at 21.5, which seems low to me against this Baltimore defense. So, yeah, this looks like a game that we're going to want to target. It's not quite as juicy as the Commanders and Cowboys was last week, but it's one that we definitely want to be involved in. Let's move on to the next game, which is actually according to our just overall grades, our best shot to be a shootout this week, which is somewhat surprising because it's the Carolina Panthers versus the Buffalo Bills. The Bills part isn't really surprising. The Carolina side is a little bit surprising. But they have a really solid advantage on offense just across the board. Really the only disadvantage that we see here is a slight disadvantage in the pass block versus pass rush. It does sound like Andy Dalton's going to be starting this week with Bryce Young suffering a high ankle sprain. I think that actually works in the favor of the receivers a little bit. But this run advantage is very big against Buffalo's run defense. I think, again, this is skewed a little bit because the run defense for Buffalo has 3 or 4 games with Ed Oliver being out. He is back in now and healthy. So I do anticipate that they are a better run defense than what this shows here for Carolina. Like, it shows a big advantage for Carolina. I do think that Carolina is a good running football team. Their offensive line is actually showing to be a solid offensive line. That's a surprise of what we expected coming into the year, but we're into week 8 now. What happened last year is irrelevant, right? Like, we have enough data now that we know we have a good feeling for these teams. And Carolina's been pretty healthy throughout the year, so their offensive grades should be pretty steady. I don't think it's a big step back from Bryce Young to Andy Dalton. So that really shouldn't impact the grades. And honestly, for stacking purposes, since Andy Dalton isn't going to run, not that Bryce Young runs a lot, but he runs more than Dalton does. So that, to me, it makes it just easier to stack if we're playing Dalton as a quarterback. The hard part about the running backs for Carolina is obviously they're splitting it now. We would lean Dowdle, but if he's not getting all of the workload, it could make it really hard to get to that 25-point number that we need to have a shot at the Milly Maker. So we'll look at pricing, but it might be hard to get to these guys. But I am interested in Dalton stacks or just Dalton naked because he is so cheap. We'll look at that pricing here in a second. On the Buffalo side, they're just a good team. They run their offense through the run game. A solid matchup advantage here in the run game. I think they're going to be able to pass at will as well, although these corners have picked up quite a bit for Carolina. J.C. Horn's been playing pretty well. But a good advantage for Buffalo across the board on offense, just green all the way across, which is generally a pretty good indicator of a big week, and they have a high total of 28.5. I find it interesting that Carolina is only at 18.5. Vegas still doesn't believe in Carolina despite them having success pretty much week in and week out. I mean, they're 4-3 now, which is crazy to think. 4-3 Carolina Panthers. Let's jump over and look at pricing. Sorry, Buffalo. Josh Allen at 7,500. That's a low price. I'll build a few Josh Allen. I'll probably just build Josh Allen nakeds. It's impossible to know who he's going to. And even if lots of times with these guys is they're getting, Coleman's getting a decent amount of targets throughout the year. But even when they do get the touchdown, it's hard for these guys to have like those big weeks. We don't see any 25s here, right? Palmer might be out. That could help. Yeah, we'll see. I don't think Palmer will play. That might concentrate it a little bit more between Shakir and Coleman and see if Kincaid's playing. I would expect him to be back. I think they saw that they were going into the bye. He probably might have been like on the edge of playing, but they didn't want to aggravate it going into their bye week. So I'd expect Kincaid to play. He actually would be the stacking partner that I'd be most interested in at 4,300. If he gets in the end zone, then he can be a winning play. Like a 19.8 from him. Well, that's huge. I didn't realize he had 100 yards. Yeah, Kincaid would definitely needs to be a bigger focus for us. If he gets, the 66 yards and a TD and gets us at 17.6 like that, that is a big win for us at tight end at that price point. So Allen to Kincaid, I like a lot, but I really like James Cook. This is the guy that I like the most coming out of this game. He's had 2 duds, but early in the season was absolutely killing it. He's too cheap at 6,700 against the Panthers here. Like the Panthers have a much better run D this year than what they had previously. With Brown being back in the middle, he's made a massive difference. But this offense for Buffalo is different than what they've been facing in previous weeks. This isn't the Jets without Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. Like this is the Buffalo Bills with an exceptional offense and James Cook. So I think this could be a big Cook week. He will be one of my go-to plays. He might be my highest rostered running back when it's all said and done. And I'm okay with playing Cook and Allen together. There's a few times last year that they were both top 5 in same weeks. For Allen to really go off, it tends to need to be more of a back and forth game, more of a shootout. You would think that's not a huge possibility with Andy Dalton under center, but Buffalo's defense is not good. It's going to be hard for them. Like, obviously, they're a Super Bowl contender because they have Josh Allen, but their defense is a problem, and it could make it hard for them to go deep into the playoffs. So, Dalton, 4,500, that's a lot of fun. We got a few. Dalton and Penix are going to be fun to build with. Going to allow us to get to a lot of things that in most weeks we're not going to be able to get to. I think both these guys have a very legitimate shot of putting up 25 points. Obviously, Dalton hasn't played much this year, but he's very capable. And I also think he's been in this league for many years now. He's not going to get a lot more opportunities to play. He's not going to be hesitant. He's going to let it rip if they need to let it rip. If they get in a situation where they're behind and they have to abandon the run game, I like that type of scenario a lot. Like I like the idea of building a James Cook lineup with Andy Dalton and, Tedero McMillan on the other side, or Leggett. Coker let us down last week. Had 2 targets, but no catches. So it was a bummer. But at least he got out of the game healthy. But yeah, all 3 of these guys are in play. Let's see if Sanders did anything last week. 2 targets, but no catches. I mean, I think going into the Jets game, they just knew that the Jets weren't going to be able to do anything on offense. So as long as they didn't turn the ball over, they were going to win. So they went into it with a very conservative game plan, which is kind of what I was expecting. So I pretty much just faded that game completely besides the Panthers offense. This week is not going to be that, though. You're playing the Buffalo Bills. You're not playing the New York Jets. So I think that they will have to open it up a little bit more. This might be a week that we see Tet's like real big game. I very well could see Andy Dalton just going to Tedero consistently against this really bad Bills secondary. This Bills secondary is atrocious. So I think there's potential here. There's definitely potential here. McMillan will be one of my core plays this week. And I'm going to mix in Leggett and Coker. There'll be some punt plays for me. We're going to have a decent amount of punt plays available for us this week. It's going to be obviously important to get that right. But I think there's a decent amount of people in this 4 to 3,800 range that could be solid this week. I probably won't go to Sanders. I would rather go to Loveland at that 3,000 than I would want to go to Sanders. Tedero McMillan, though, 5,700 against a really bad secondary. That seems like a really good spot to me. So McMillan on his own. This running game, it's going to be hard to get to Dowdle at 6,300. Maybe we do. Maybe we do. I think Carolina's going to be able to move the ball. He's going to be a part of that. It's just a matter of who gets. I mean, we need him to get 2 touchdowns, really, to give us a usable score of this 6,300. It's possible. He can't be a core play because of the split with Chuba. Yeah, it's tough with the split. It's tough with the split for sure at this pricing. Better than the 6,800 he was at last week. But I think there's going to be points scored in this game. Dowdle is definitely a candidate to score those points. So I think we will need to mix them in. We'll build some game stacks of this. We'll build some stacks of this game being the highest scoring game of the week and the most fantasy points coming out of it. Build someone with like 3 or 4, maybe even 5 players coming out of this game. But across our player pool, James Cook will be in it, and Tedero McMillan are 2 core plays that will come out of this game for sure. And we'll do some more digging as the week goes on to see if there's other pieces we want to get more exposure to. I have a feeling that Andy Dalton will be one of my higher rostered quarterbacks for sure. All right, let's move on to our next game. We got the New York Jets, and their 0-7 record coming in against the Cincinnati Bengals, who are coming off a big win against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Thursday Night Football, where Joe Flacco looked like an absolute badass, turned the clock back and just got the ball to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins against a pretty good defense in the Pittsburgh Steelers. These grades for Cincinnati are skewed pretty dramatically because of the Jake Browning weeks. So it's not a great reflection of what's going moving forward, but this receiving advantage is big, and I'm going to be leaning into that. The pass blocking versus pass rush is definitely something to be aware of, but it's not nearly as bad of an advantage as what they had last week. Let me go double check that. We can look at last week's matchups. Cincy, I've got the updated formatting on this one, but because this is just the Thursday night game, Cincy's on the top row. Yeah, so last week they had a minus 40 disadvantage against Pittsburgh, and they still put up a massive week. So to me, that number is skewed. It's a much better advantage matchup this week against the Jets. The Jets are not good. Sauce has played okay, but that doesn't deter me away from Jamar Chase at all. The run game has been really bad, but it was much better last week, and I think it will only get better moving forward with Flacco in there. And the other thing to consider is Flacco got traded 2 weeks ago, started the first game against the Packers after arriving to the team 4 days previously, and then had to play a Thursday night game. So now he's getting basically a mini bye with the Thursday night game, 10 days to really actually get into the offense. I think they'll have more of a playbook, but I think that they understand that for them to win football games, they have to just start playing right out of the gates like it's a fourth quarter comeback type scenario. Like they have to be aggressive. The way that they're going to win games is by winning shootouts because their defense is not good. And yeah, I mean, actually, like we know how bad the Jets have been all year long, but we're showing green across the board for their offense. It's crazy. So I think like I don't want to really play Jets. I might play Breece Hall this week. I'm expecting Garrett Wilson to still be out, but if he's back in, we can consider it. I think Taylor's going to start. That'll be my guess. We'll see. If they go back to Fields, I would have interest in Fields. Said Monday doesn't know yet. I would definitely go back to Fields at 5K against Cincinnati's defense if he gets back out there. Breece Hall will be in play this week. Faded him completely last week. Just don't think people understand that Carolina's run defense is much better this year. But beyond that, like I just knew that offense wasn't going to be able to move the ball. Like they have Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall and Justin Fields, and like that's it as far as offensive weapons. They weren't going to be able to move the ball. Carolina was going to be able to key in on nothing except Breece Hall. But Cincinnati has a really bad defense. This week they'll be able to move the ball a little bit better. I think there's going to be more of a back and forth nature to this game. I don't think it'll be necessarily like the shootout that we saw on Thursday night. Like it could, but I mean, maybe. I mean, you can see a game where you see Justin Fields just running all over the place against the Cincinnati defense. I think Trey Hendricks was out last week too, so we'll have to keep an eye on that to see if he's playing. If he's not playing, that makes it even more intriguing. Keep an eye on Garrett Wilson. I would expect he's out this week, but if he's in, then all of a sudden this game gets really intriguing to me. If they start Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson is back, this could be a really fun game. It could be a really fun game for DFS purposes. At 6K, Wilson would be very intriguing. My first reaction is like, I don't want to mess with these guys. Looks like Josh Reynolds was a go-to target last week with 9 targets. So maybe we can mix in some Reynolds again. Another guy in that 3,900 range that's usable. Lazard didn't do much. 3 targets for Smith as well. Yeah, we'll keep an eye on this. If Wilson's in, this game becomes a lot more intriguing to me. Mason Taylor had 5 targets. He would be in play as well. Let's go over to the Cincy side. Flacco, 5,400. I like that a lot. A lot of really good options to punt at QB this week. We got Joe Flacco, we got Andy Dalton, and we got Michael Penix. All seem like options that could score 25 plus. And if we get a quarterback scores 25 plus and we match him with the right pass catcher, like if you assuming that they have a pass catcher that is top 5, but you would assume most of the time if a guy throws for 20 or has 25 plus fantasy points, there's generally going to be a pass catcher that has around that as well. So I like Flacco a lot here. Chase Brown at 5,400 is definitely in play for me. Obviously has not done shit all year long. It's been trash. But last week, 11 for 108. It's crazy what competent quarterback play does for you. And this defense is a lot worse than the Steelers' defense. The Jets have a very bad defense. So, yeah, I like Chase Brown a lot, actually. He will probably be a core play for me at 5,400. It creates with him, and we got James Cook. We also got Derrick Henry we can mix in. We got DeAndre Swift. So we can have a lot of different combinations where we can get to Bijan or even Achane, and then maybe Jonathan Taylor because we can punt at both QB, and we have some more affordable plays at running back this week that we didn't have last week. Jamar Chase at 8,100. That one, I like it. I'll build at least one lineup with each of my core quarterbacks with him. And then obviously plenty with Flacco. But I actually like Higgins here more because Chase will be with Sauce. Not that that's like a disadvantage for Chase. Like Chase is, just made Jalen Ramsey look bad, and Jalen Ramsey is still an elite corner. So he can do that against anybody. But to me, this is a T. Higgins game. T. Higgins will be a core play for me. this week, without a doubt. Crazy to how things change as the season goes along. Joe Flacco to T. Higgins was not on the bingo card in week 1, that's for sure. But yeah, obviously with Flacco, really, especially with Gesicki out, I'm not going to go to Fant, especially at 3,200. I can't believe 3,200. What is that? I mean, I guess he did have a touchdown last week, but yeah, he should be cheaper than that. I mean, I guess I'll mix him into a couple Flacco lineups. So Flacco's very easy to stack. Flacco with Chase Brown, Flacco with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and then combinations of all those. I will definitely have some builds with all 4 of those guys, Flacco, Brown, Chase, and Higgins in the same lineup, that we're playing for much more of a back and forth game. I'd probably have 2 Jets in that lineup too. Just if they go crazy, for them to go crazy, I think it has to be more of a back and forth type game. But there's plenty of scenarios where they jump out to a 21-0 lead. So we can build that was more of Flacco +1, maybe Flacco +2. So I'm going to have plenty of Flacco to Higgins lineups, plenty of Flacco to Chase lineups. And then I'm going to have a good chunk of across my other lineup stacks that I'll will be Chase Brown plus Higgins, where, you got the running back plus the passing game. I think Chase Brown's got a really good chance of having a big week this week. I like this spot a lot for him, especially at his new lower price, a lot lower than what we were expecting early in the year. So some intriguing spots this week. We're back to not necessarily chasing elite offenses, but kind of mediocre offenses so far through the year. But we also have to be ready to evolve with the changes as they're occurring. Obviously, the grades that we're looking at here for Cincinnati are kind of irrelevant now because it's a completely different team with Flacco. And they also had a crazy tough schedule early in the year when it comes to defenses that they faced. This is a much better matchup for them with Joe Flacco being there for his 3rd week now. We should have a better grasp of the offense. So I like how all of this is setting up for the Bengals. And their pricing too. If Joe Burrow was in this, it would be so hard to build these stacks. But with Flacco being here, it's awesome. We can build all sorts of different stacks and fit in all of our other core plays across the board. So these 3 games are all intriguing to me, actually, as potential shootouts. They kind of look ugly, but there's potential there. So move on to our next game. We got the San Francisco 49ers taking on the Houston Texans. This looks like a pretty ugly game overall. We probably will get Purdy back. They got George Kittle back last week. They probably will get back this week is my anticipation. So they're getting healthier, which is just good overall for San Francisco. And I think there are big weeks to come for San Fran. But Houston's defense is very good. When we scroll over and we look at their defensive grades, actually a pretty bad tackling grade, but everything else is green. They're towards the top there. So to me, this isn't a smash button option for San Francisco. And Houston, I just don't think is a very good offense. I honestly don't think they're a great team. And with the possibility of Nico being out after getting a concussion, this really looks like a tough spot. So for the most part, I'm going to be fading this game. Let's go look at pricing just to see it and make sure we're not missing anything. If 5,800 needs to be in consideration for sure. Obviously, CMC at 9K. For me, he's going to be pretty much a full fade this week. He did have his 40-point game, but Atlanta's not a bad defense, but Houston is a better defense. And I just think that Bijan at $200 cheaper has a much, much higher likelihood of putting up 40 this week. So most of the time, I don't want to touch anybody at 9K anyways because they have to get this 40 spot to be used. Obviously, McCaffrey can do that. But I think it's more likely he's going to be in this 25-point range. And also, I think his volume is going to probably come down a little bit as guys get healthier. They've had to rely on him so much. Look at this target, 10, 7, 15, 11. And you even saw it came down a little bit last week with 8, just at the lower end of his targets. So I would start to expect to see these targets be hovering more around 6 to 8 on a weekly basis rather than getting up into this 11 and 15 range once they get guys back with Ricky Pearsall. Jennings has played back-to-back weeks and actually got in some practice. And then you got Pearsall coming back as well. So I think McCaffrey will continue to be an awesome redraft player, but in DFS, this just doesn't feel like the right spot for me. Woody Marks burned us earlier in the year. Got 10 carries last night. Let's look at the split between him and Chubb. Yeah, I mean, he's more of the go-to guy. But if Nico's out, we'll see. Yeah, they also have the short week, too, because it's a Monday night game. That's something to... Yeah, it's likely that we don't see Nico this week. There's a really good chance that we don't see Nico. So I'd be more interested actually in San Fran's D. At 2,900, it's not too cheap, though, so... Let's look at wide receiver for San Fran. 5,400 for Pearsall is a steal if he starts. If he's back, definitely interested in Jennings at 4,600. Got his targets back up, and if Purdy comes back, there is that connection between Bourne and Mac Jones, but Jennings it's going to be a lot heavier with Purdy at 4,600. That he seems like a really good play to me as long as Purdy plays. If Pearsall doesn't play, I would probably get somewhere around like 40% Jennings at 4,600 if Purdy's playing. Even though there's probably not going to be a ton of points out of this, but you'd still expect San Francisco to move the ball. Let's see what their implied total is. 21 points basically. So there's still room for somebody to come out of that game that's at 4,600, if Jennings is top 10 at receiver, he doesn't, even if he puts up a 20 spot, like that's very usable to help us take down a Milly Maker. And yeah, I mean, the 1 week that he was decently healthy, he did put up a 20 spot. So yeah, give me some Juwan Jennings if Pearsall's out. George Kittle, 4,500. That's probably too cheap. Obviously, he didn't get targeted at all last night, but yeah, I mean, they just were running the ball. Last night, 24 attempts for McCaffrey. I think it's going to be a little bit different when this next week. I think the play calling will be a little bit different. I think Kittle will definitely get more touches, could have a bigger game. I'll have to dig into more matchup specific advantages there as far as like who they plan on having guarding Kittle. I also think that they'll be running a decent amount of play action this week, which really opens up for Kittle as well. So Kittle and Jennings are two very interesting options for me. I mean, like same thing for Kittle. At 4,500, if you put up a 20 spot, you can win a Milly Maker with that. So that is intriguing, those two guys at that price, despite having a tougher matchup against Houston. I'm glad we dug into this because that is definitely in play. We'll definitely keep that in mind. Keep an eye on Pearsall throughout the week. Let's go ahead and jump into Cleveland and New England. PFF loves Cleveland's defense, basically the highest rating across the board at everything for the Cleveland Browns defense. Offensively, this game looks ugly. The matchups look like big advantages for the defenses, but we got Drake May, and I just think that the Patriots are good. So this isn't the best spot for Drake May. We'll look at pricing. I probably won't have like a huge amount of him, but I'm not going to fade him fully. He's just too good of a player. I don't think it matters what defense they're playing. He's going to have opportunities for success week in and week out with as good as he is. Cleveland, I'm pretty much going to full fade this week. Yeah, it's 6,500, an increase of 500 there. It's going to be harder to get to in this one. They were playing Miami last week. They're not playing Miami this week. New England is a much better team. I probably won't get to Gabriel if we look at this matchup again. The minus 33.3 in the pass block versus pass rush is just very hard to overcome. And a little bit of advantage in the run versus run D, but disadvantage in the run block versus run D. So it's hard to see Cleveland scoring a lot of points. It's in New England. Yeah, it's hard to go to a running back that's a 7.5 point underdog on the road with an offense that you don't expect to move the ball too effectively. So I probably won't have Judkins. There's just options that seem much more attractive at lower prices that we've already looked at. We'll fade Judkins this week. I'm not going to get to Gabriel either. There's just too many other good punt options this week. I don't want to waste a lineup on Gabriel when I can have Andy Dalton, Joe Flacco, and Michael Penix. Those all just seem like much better situations for success to happen compared to Dylan Gabriel against the Patriots. Judy's super cheap, but I still think there's better punt options. Fannin at 4,400. Give me George Kittle at 4,500 all day. Like, I know Fannin's going to is being consistently targeted. Njoku might be back this week as well. Especially if Njoku's back, I probably won't get any Fannin. So yeah, pretty much out on Cleveland. See what their defense is at this week. Still at 2,500. That's in play. Drake May is known to get sacked, hold on the ball a little bit longer. And it's not that, he's playing really well, but it's not that he's immune to turnovers by any means. So this is intriguing. Browns at 2,500. Obviously, we were 80% Browns last week, and that served us very well. But the New England Patriots are not the Miami Dolphins. So we have to consider all of that. But at 2,500, they're in play. Patriots is going to be hard to get to at 3,600. Drake May, 6,200. Dude's playing very well. Had a great game. But again, they're playing Tennessee last week. They're not playing Tennessee this week. Like, Cleveland is a very, very good defense. Maybe not as good as PFF says, but they're good. They're definitely good. See, doesn't have many turnovers, just 2 interceptions this year. But he has been sacked a lot. So, something to keep an eye on. Stevenson, maybe. Diggs and Butte, intriguing as well. Not super intriguing. I'll probably just keep it to May plus Diggs, May plus Booty, and May plus Henry, and not really play these guys outside of my Drake May stacks. That's probably what I'll end up doing, is just building 5 to 6 Drake May teams, mixing up the single stacking partner with them, and just building out from there, just avoiding this game beyond that. All right, moving on to Philadelphia versus the New York Giants. Obviously, New York Giants knocked off Philadelphia a couple weeks ago in very surprising fashion. You got the Jackson Dart and Cam Skattebo coming out party. Last week, the Giants lose to Broncos in a horrific game that ruined my DFS week and really shouldn't have happened. Some pretty bad game management there from Dayball, actually. But Dart has been playing pretty well. Like, there were some fluky. It's crazy how fluky that game was. Like, you have 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns off of tipped passes. Like, you had one that went right through Wan'Dale Robinson's hands, ends up in Theo Johnson's hands, and he runs it in for a long touchdown. And then you had the crazy back-and-forth nature at the end of that game. But Dart, I think we've got to consider moving forward. And same with Cam. Like, we just saw them have a big week against Philly. My thoughts are, though, is that the Giants actually are still not a good team. Brian Daboll is not a great head coach in my mind. I think he is trying to attach himself to Jackson Dart and show that his philosophy with Jackson Dart is the only way it's going to work. And so you got to keep him around. You don't want to ruin that development. But I have a feeling that this little bit of momentum they have right now and excitement that they have in New York is going to fade over the weeks to come, and this season is going to crash and burn, and Daboll will be gone. That's my prediction. And I think that Philadelphia at home, after just losing to these guys less than 2 weeks ago, they played on Thursday night, that they're going to come out with an intensity and just try to bury these guys. That's what I think is the most likely outcome. Let's see pricing-wise here. Barkley at 7,600, very intrigued at that. He hasn't had a big game yet, obviously. Last week was trash as well, 18 for 44. They ran some more stuff under center, though, and I think that's a good thing for Barkley. I think it's also a good thing for Jalen Hurts and the receivers because it sets up more of the play action game. And if they're successful in that, it'll start opening up running lanes for Saquon. He still looks good. The offensive line has just been banged up, and they're just not as good as they were last year. But that being said, Saquon looks explosive to me, and that big game is coming. And against his old team, this feels like a great time for it, especially since they lost against the Giants a couple weeks ago. I really think Philly's going to come out and just try to bury these guys. Hurts at 6,600. That's way too cheap for Hurts. He was in our best lineup we had last week. But you got the tush-push opportunity with him, as well as easy stacking partners with Brown, Smith, and Goddard. And they're all of them are still too cheap. Thought they would actually bump up a good chunk more after the big week. So, yeah, I like Philly here. I like Philly stacks. I like Saquon plus these receivers in non-hurt stacks. And Goddard's in play as well. He didn't have a big game last week, but he's had big games throughout the year, been pretty solid. Go over to the Giants side. Dart at 5,500. I honestly would rather play Flacco. Had 23.5 against these guys a couple weeks ago. Like, there's no doubt he plays with swagger. He plays with confidence. I don't want to completely disregard that. I'll build lineups with him moving forward. I faded him completely last week. Obviously, that was a poor choice. Just felt like going against Denver's defense, that wasn't the best spot for it. And for 3.5 quarters, I was right, and then I wasn't. But that's how it plays out. I just think, like I said, I think Philly is going to have a little bit different approach to this game than what they had a couple weeks ago. I don't think they liked getting to see the two rookies celebrate and be the talk of the town for that whole week. So I like Philly to have a lot of success in this game. Cam at 6,600 is definitely in play. He's gonna get the majority of the work. Tracy did score yesterday, so the split is something we have to keep an eye on. Cam's gonna get more, but yeah, you got Tracy with 9 carries here, and Cam with 16 with also 6 targets. Cam will be in the mix pretty solidly for me, but not like one of my go-to core plays. Wandale's somebody we got to consider. He's just getting so many targets. He's expanding the field a little bit more this year. Like, his ADOT has been a lot higher than it was last year. We'll see if they get Slayton back. That could help a little bit too. And Theo Johnson, kind of a fluky big game last week because the pass wasn't intended, but he scored on the long touchdown. I think he's 3,700, probably a little bit too expensive. Maybe some of my dart lineups, I'll build him in there, but I don't love him by any means. Definitely more intrigued on the Philly side of this game. Obviously, we just saw it go the other direction a couple weeks ago, but I really do think that narrative is going to play into it this week. We got Tampa Bay against New Orleans. Tampa coming off a tough loss to Mike Evans for a while with a broken collarbone. Egbuka made it through the game without re-injuring the hamstring from what I saw. Let's see if there's any update on that. Yeah, so it looks like he's okay. Evans is going to be out for a while. Yep, the 1,000-yard streak comes to an end, unfortunately. Sad. But Godwin's probably not back yet, from what I'm hearing. Shepard had 7 targets last night. Didn't really do anything with them. 7 receptions for 25 yards. Man, it'd be nice if McMillan could come back, but I don't think. This was a few weeks ago. Still in a neck brace 2 weeks ago. Doesn't sound promising. It's a real bummer. He'd be having a huge year if he wouldn't have got hurt in that preseason game. It's a bummer for him. So, Shepard at 4,500. There's better punt plays we've seen, so probably would have to pass. Primarily would be Egbuka. Yeah, Tez Johnson. He's more intriguing to me than Shepard for sure. There seemed like a couple times last night where he was not where he was supposed to be, or at least not where Baker wanted him to be on a few routes. So we'll see if that continues to play out. So maybe Tez Johnson, but obviously Egbuka is 7K. We got to be intrigued in that going against New Orleans. That's a good spot in New Orleans too. That's a nice spot. Cade Otton, he's in play at 3,400 for sure. And Baker at 6,400, he's in play as well. So Baker to Egbuka, Baker to Otton, double stack there. Wonder if we'll get Bucky back this week. I kind of sound like he's going to be out for a while longer. I would like Rachaad White here if it's just him next week against New Orleans, but primarily going to be building this through Baker. Go back and look at this. Solid advantage, nothing crazy, but solid across the board. And then, okay, bad run blocking, great against the run defense, but okay with just the run versus the run. And then New Orleans, like just bad across the board. Rattler hasn't been horrible in the dome. We could consider Olave and Shaheed. Beyond that, I don't have much interest though. Rattler at home has been a lot better. Yeah, home game is 21-7, 11-5, 6. Yeah, I mean, I guess fantasy-wise, it hasn't been that big of a difference. But from a turnover standpoint, he had 3 picks last week. Up until last week, he had been playing pretty well. So it felt like he was pressing last week, and I think the win conditions and all that stuff might have been playing into it. I'm more intrigued in him this week than I was last week playing at home in the dome. Might mix him in a little bit. There's a lot of good punt options this week at quarterback. Probably out on 5,700. Alvin could be in play. With Kendre Miller out, he's much more intriguing. So we'll keep an eye on that. Olave, 5,800. He made me look dumb last week because I said 15 points doesn't do us any good, but he finally got in the end zone. Did the same thing, but he had 2 TDs last week. So I think most weeks he's still going to be around this 15 mark. I don't really want to overreact to that. So I'll probably be fading him for the most part. Shaheed, though, I like his spot better here. I like him getting that 25 spot for a cheaper number. So Shaheed will be one of my favorite receiver plays. Probably somewhere around 10-15% with him, which is a big number for me for somebody that's that cheap. Tight end, I'm not touching. Juwan had a good game last week, but with Taysom Hill being back, he's just not going to get enough volume. So primarily Baker in this one, and then Shaheed coming out of it. Let's jump back over now for a fun game. We got ourselves a really good one here. Anytime Dallas plays, we love it. This is in Denver. There's a good chance that we see the longest field goal ever this week. There might be a 70-yarder this week at Mile High with Brandon Aubrey. That does nothing for us in DFS, but just a fun thing. If you want to throw, if there's any bets for a 70-yard field goal, I don't even know that's a thing. But if it is, that might be a fun bet this week at altitude with Brandon Aubrey playing there. Anyways, Dak Prescott is good. He's very good, and he's got his weapons back, and the offensive line is playing pretty well. This is improved week to week. If we look at their pass block grade over here, it's bad, but it's better than where it has been in previous weeks. Like if we go over here and we look at Dallas last week, pass block was 45.4, and this week it's gone up 3 points. So they're going in the right direction. In previous weeks, it was even lower than that. So they seem to be gelling a little bit. They got Booker back last week on the line as well. So that helped. But their advantage in the receiving game and the pass game is just exceptional. Even going against Surtain this week, that doesn't concern me. I'm still very much in on Dallas being able to move the ball and move the ball effectively. So all of the Dallas guys are in play. This is very intriguing for the Broncos as well. Their best matchup they've had in a long time. Also, Dallas's defense is just horrific. Played a little bit better last week against Bill, and they ruined our dreams. But it might be hard to get to J.K. Dot. It's hard because of the split here. So, it's a massive advantage for Denver's run game. But the split makes it a little harder. J.K.'s been getting, the more solid work, the majority of, the important touches. Yeah, RJ only had 4 carries last week, but he's getting a little bit more in the pass game. But Dobbins at 5,800. Maybe we do need to go there. I didn't realize Harvey has only been getting 4 carries. You would think that Sean Payton would attack that matchup a lot more than what fucking Kingsbury did last week and ruined our dreams. Damn it. Never going to get over it. I was supposed to win $1 million in week 7, and Cliff Kingsbury ruined my life. But anyways, Bo Nix at 6K obviously had the huge game last week, all in the fourth quarter. Crazy that he put up a 40 spot like that. That's insanity. He played so poorly, and then it all just went crazy in that fourth quarter. But obviously, anytime the Cowboys are involved, there's a really good chance for a shootout. Bo Nix is easy to stack because it's Bo Nix to Sutton. Obviously, we can do variations off of that. We can throw Mims in there. He had popped a little bit last week. Dan Franklin had 10 targets, but didn't do anything with them last week. So we can mix these guys in. Again, more solid punt plays. It's going to be hard to navigate that range because there's just so many people in that range that makes sense this week. So we got to get it right. We got to figure out who it is. But there's a lot of guys in that range that I think somebody out of this 3,800-ish range, somebody's going to have a 25 spot. If we can figure out who that person is, we'll be able to build some really nice lineups. Could be Franklin, could be Mims for sure. Ingram, let's see what he's been doing. His target volume's definitely been increasing, but it's hard to see him really as a guy that we're going to be attacking just because it's unlikely he gets in the end zone, and he's not a run after the catch type guy. So maybe a few Ingram, just because there's a good chance that both teams score 5 touchdowns in this game, and Ingram could get 1 or 2 of them. At 4,100, that's somewhat intriguing. So it's going to be hard to get real concentrated this week is what I'm seeing, is because there's just so many decent options and not a ton of slam dunk options this week. So it'll be kind of hard to navigate. It'll be harder to have a concise player pool, but maybe that works to our advantage as we get into the week. Too much for the Broncos D against Dallas, that's for sure. So primarily on this side, Nix, Dobbins, and Sutton with a couple punt plays in there. Let's go to the Dallas side. Prescott is 6,500. That is crazy to me. He's not in the 7K range. These numbers he's putting up. Dude's a stud. I will have plenty of Dak Prescott this week. Javonte revenge narrative. This is fun. He was trash for the Broncos last year, but he has been an absolute stud for the Cowboys this year. Obviously going back to the team that drafted him, but didn't even make him an offer this offseason. Yeah, I like him having a big game. Javonte will be one of the core plays. A little bit harder at 6,800, but cannot ignore that. He is their dude. And we got Lamb and Pickens. Pickens seems to be the better play, is my initial thought, but actually he'll probably get matched up against Surtain quite a bit because he'll be on the outside and Lamb will be on the inside a decent amount. So I'll go at both of these guys. This is just a good on good matchup, obviously, but I like Dallas to have success in that. I mean, they've played good defenses throughout the year against the Packers. They put up a 40 spot against the Giants. They put up a 40 spot. They've had success against solid pass rushes and solid defenses. So I don't expect them to do anything different. Ferguson at 6K. Now he's getting up there. Makes it harder to build with him, but we'll definitely be building Dak stacks. We're not going to go away from that. Dak +1, Dak +2, and Dak +3. are all in play. I primarily like the double stacks with Dak. Last week it didn't quite play out the way we needed it to. Would have been better to not have Dak. Lamb and Ferguson were all solid, but none of them went big. But in any particular week, you can have one or two of these guys have top 5 weeks. So we will attack them even though they're playing a solid Broncos defense. This is a fun game. We've got 4 different games this week that I think have pretty solid shootout potential. Last game of the week, we got Indianapolis taking on the Tennessee Titans. You don't need to see the grades. The Colts are a lot better than the Titans. It's going to be a lot harder to get to our boy Jonathan Taylor this week at his price, but with the punt QB options, it's definitely plausible to build. He's at 9,500, and I really do think that they're making an effort to make him Offensive Player of the Year. So he's in play. I definitely will be building Daniel Jones stacks. Daniel Jones plus Pittman. Daniel Jones plus Warren. So 5,500. That to me is more attractive than Ferguson at 6K. Pittman had a week last week, jumped up 500 here. But he's their go-to guy. I think 20-ish is like his ceiling, though. So as he creeps up in price, it becomes less attractive. See if Downs plays this week. Concussion, you expect him to be back this week. And then Pierce, 10 targets last week with Downs being out. You'd expect that to come down back more towards the 5 or so. But he's another solid punt play at 4,600. I think there's some better options, but it's not too crazy to see Pierce scoring a long touchdown against Tennessee at home too in Indianapolis. So I like this to be a route. It's really just a matter of like who gets the touchdowns early. It's hard to see, like you could take a guy like Pierce because, he can get 2 or 3 plays and get to like 70 yards and a touchdown. Like if he gets 4 for 70 and a TD, that's 11, 17 points. And that's doable at 4,600. Like that could be a score that's usable in a Milly Maker. Where Pittman, like for him to really like pay off, you need him to get over 100 and have some solid volume. And there's a really good chance that this game's over by halftime, and so they're just not going to be pushing the ball. So it's something to consider when we're looking at Pittman. Overall, it's a solid play. I mean, he's a good player, but for that ceiling outcome, it doesn't really seem like an environment that is likely to create a ceiling outcome. So we'll build some Jones to pass catcher lineups. The thought process behind that is they kind of do like what the Chiefs did last week against the Raiders, where they come out early and throw 3 passing touchdowns in the first half. And then in the second half, just kind of slow the game down a little bit. But you could score enough fantasy points in that first half that there's guys that are usable there. So we'll build a few lineups with that type of approach to it. There's just so many decent options in the mid-range at running back this week. So I was going to say maybe some Taylor and Robinson lineups together. But the more I think about it, it's probably better to do Taylor plus a cheaper running back, and same thing with Bijan and a cheaper running back. So we'll look at different combinations of how we can make that happen. But most weeks I'm going to try to fade a super high-priced running back. Last week it bit us in the ass. We can see that Taylor at 8,800 was a must-have, where he had 8 more points than any other running back. So, yeah, it makes sense for Taylor to be in play. But most weeks when we look at it, there's cheaper guys that make the guy in the 8,000s not worth it. But that just wasn't the case last week. Like even here, he had a solid week at 8K, but Javonte, Rashad White, and Dowdle were all better plays for point per value standpoint. Actually, not White, but Javonte, Krosky, and Dowdle were all better points per salary plays. And then in week 4, Genty was in the 6,200 range. Hampton and Irving were all better plays than Bijan. But you're going to have those outlier weeks like we had last week. But this was a week where you needed Taylor, but at this time he was 7,200, so it's a little bit different layout. All that being said, there's a chance that he has a 40-point game this week at 9,500. Man, even at 40 points, 9,500 is just way expensive. So maybe we won't get there. I'll try to build him a little bit, but that's a massive salary. Bijan just looks like a much better play to me. I think that environment, because Bijan can get it on the ground or through the air a lot more than Jonathan Taylor will. There's no elements in either of these games. But yeah, Bijan seems like the better play to me. Obviously, both guys are incredible, but the pricing, saving $700 to get to Bijan Robinson seems more intriguing to me. So that's probably where we'll end up with most of our running backs. So let's build a lineup here. Let's just build an Atlanta heavy one. We'll go Penix, Bijan, and London right out of the gates here. Where do we want to go for our second running back? Go Barkley. Achane could be the run back for us if that game is a little bit more back and forth. Let's say that Achane has a big week. Now we're going to have to go cheap at wide receiver. We're definitely going to have to punt a tight end too. So let's go down here and find our punt tight end of the week. Loveland's cheap. Otten. Intriguing. Let's go with Otten here. And wide receiver. Let's figure out what we're going to do at defense too. Browns look like the best punt D to me this week. Maybe the Bengals D at 2,700. It's funny, just because the Jets are so bad. For now, let's plug in the Browns. If you guys watch the channel, you must think I'm a Browns fan since I'm on their defense every single week. All right, so we got 5,500 left for 2 wide receivers and a flex. Let's get our boy McMillan in there. Actually, I want a little game stack here. I want James Cook in that game. Feel a lot better about Cook than I do. Still want to be betting on the Dolphins much. The Bills and Panthers here. We got that little stack there. Bills secondary is trash. Could be a big week for our boy Teteroa McMillan. As we go down here, we go back to Devonta Smith after the big week. Definitely in play. Oh, yeah. We got to get Higgins. We got to get our boy Higgins in there. Then we got a lot of good options in this range. Seems like a middling week to me. Like we can get to Robinson and punt at tight end and defense, and then the rest we can just kind of go core receivers in this middle ground as well as our flex play. I really don't have anything coming out of that Dallas game. So let's go ahead and get Dobbins in there. 5,800. It's not going to be as concentrated as it was last week in the one game, so we'll be building different. We'll have a lot more variety of lineups this week. But we got Michael Penix, Bijan Robinson, Drake London with our Atlanta stack. We got a little mini game stack of Cook and McMillan. Then we got Higgins with a really good matchup against the Jets and Joe Flacco being back in there. Cade Otton with probably Godwin and definitely Evans out. It pretty much is down to Egbuka and Otton at that point. And I like Otton to continue to get these higher target games and get in the end zone here sooner than later in a nice dome environment against New Orleans. And then J.K. Dobbins against that run funnel of the Dallas Cowboys that betrayed us last week, but it's not going to betray us back-to-back weeks. And give me the Browns D against a quarterback that holds the ball for a long time. Obviously a great quarterback, but I like this setup for Myles Garrett to get a few sacks. He hasn't had many opportunities to do that this year because teams have just got rid of the ball so quickly against them. This week, I think it'll be harder for New England to do that. So there is our first lineup of the week. Appreciate y'all tuning in. We'll have the player pool video out on Thursday afternoon. Let me know if you guys have any questions that you want me to address in the comments. And as always, if you're interested in getting the spreadsheet, feel free to email me at millymakermaniac@gmail.com, and I am happy to send you the spreadsheet. All right, my friends. It's a good start to week 8. Got a good feeling this week. We're going to take it down. Looking forward to a good week of prep. Good luck, my friends. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.